Thank you, Yeshua, for an opportunity once again to be with you. Glad for each one of you on our Skype are with us today, and those of you that may watch later with from our posting the message. Anyway, we just thank Yeshua for this day that He's given us, and we'll continue on into the book of Galatians here, because everybody wants to give the impression, or most everyone, that in the Messianic or Hebrew roots are Judaism, or a form of Judaism, wants to give the impression that Paul never actually changed anything from the time that he was persecuting the church to the time he started preaching Yeshua, that really nothing really changed a whole lot. But as you study, and as we study the scriptures, and especially the scriptures that Paul wrote himself, along with other scriptures that he didn't write, which verifies what he does write, including the Old Testament, we find that he changed, you might say, completely. He understood that there was between the difference, not just the difference between the Old and New Covenant, but that the two covenants were actually just that, two covenants. And of course, what we're reading today is going to verify that very thing, and by his own words, or at least the interpretation of the words that he wrote, will verify that very fact, that there was a complete change of Paul when Yeshua revealed himself to him there on the road to Damascus from what he was prior. Matter of fact, the scriptures even teaches us that Paul himself makes the account that he counted everything that he had learned prior to his revelation that Yeshua gave him on there, that he counted everything prior to that as dung, that he might gain the Messiah. So, there is we have to read it, and we have to study it, and we have to let Yeshua reveal it unto us. We can't use our own imaginations, nor other people's imaginations. This has to be between yourselves and the Messiah, and those to whom he has chosen to teach his word, or to preach his word, or to evangelize, those that are chosen to edify the assembly. He tells them, or he reveals to them, they reveal to you, to those to whom he has him to reveal, and he through that opens up understandings. Anyway, Paul is a very important and distinct apostle in this new covenant that we have today. He's very important, and I don't want to say any more important than Peter, John, James, and the rest of them. I don't mean it in a way that he's a higher standing. I don't mean it that way, but I do mean it in the way that he was chosen to bring this, and he was chosen specifically to bring this to the Gentile nation that never had the old covenant to begin with. he was chosen to bring this to them, and at the same time, as Paul, as like anybody else, me or anyone else, he as his people, the Jew or the Israel was his people, his lineage. He desired to enlighten all of them too. You know, it was at one time it was he made the statement that it was his heart's desire that all of Israel would be saved. You know. And that it was his desire, he understood that Israel had a zeal for Yahweh, but not according to knowledge. So he understood that also. But anyway, I want to get on with our lesson today. But I want people to understand, and I want to get them to get in their mind, or at least in their mind of thinking that this that you and I have today, that Paul taught, that Peter taught, that James taught, all the apostles taught, is not the same thing that was under the old covenant. It's not the same thing. They're two different covenants, and I know most people don't want to believe that. Most will tell you that that the new covenant is a renewed covenant. But this, if you'll pay attention today, Paul exemplifies today in that they are not. They are, as a matter of fact, they are totally different. And but anyway, I want to go ahead. And he has started out, and we're starting out at the fourth chapter. I'm sorry, here, and of course, it's starting out talking about the heirs. And if you'll believe, and if you'll understand, the third chapter, what we taught last Sabbath, ended up with the heirs of Abraham's seed. In other words, Abraham's seed was heirs according to the promise, including Jew and Gentiles. The 28th verse of the third chapter, matter of fact, says, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you all are one in Messiah Yeshua. And if you be Messiahs, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Now, that's not according to the covenant. It's according to the promise through faith that Yahweh made with Abraham. The promises that he gave to Abraham through the faith of Abraham, that all nations would be blessed. And this, in fact, new covenant is bringing that to pass. But it's not completing it. Even this new covenant is not completing it. Well, it will in its end, if you want to look at it that way. It will in its end because it will establish a new heaven and a new earth. It will establish all things new. In other words, it will restore everything back to where Yahweh created the heavens and the earth and all things that were in them, and created man for the purpose of glorifying Yahweh. It will restore everything back to there, but we're not into that today. But that is the ultimate goal of what's going to happen, is everything is going to be restored back to the period of time that man knew no sin. And that is his process, and that's what he's doing all the way from the time he promised Adam and Eve that there would be a Savior, a Messiah that would come, that would bruise the head of Satan. That he's bringing all of that around to that point that he made a promise to Adam and Eve, and all the way through even up until Abraham, from Abraham to his children, and then to the 12, and then to the whole house of Israel that was brought out of Egypt, and there in the wilderness was given the law and given the covenant that they were under at that time, until, as we will see today, that the Son should come. But they were all heirs. Even the heirs are no different, as we will get here in the first verse of this 4th chapter. But anyway, we're all heirs of the seed of Abraham. And let's get to the 4th verse here. It says, "Now I say, the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be master of all." And I'm going to read about the first 7 verses here, so listen to them, because then I'm going to go right back over them. "As long as he be master of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoptions of sons," not just others. "And because ye are sons, God sent forth his Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through the Messiah." And if you study that out, through the Messiah, you'll find that it's through faith in him do you become the heir of the promise. Because, why? That's how Abraham received was counted for his righteousness, was his faith, not his works, not his deeds, that was contained in the laws, or the old covenant, but by his faith in his Messiah, or in his God. He was, by his faith in him did he attain what he did, and by his faith in him did he attain the promise of the promise that he received from Yahweh, that in him would all nations be blessed. And that we now, or Paul is now saying, this is now being realized by our Messiah, that we now teach and preach, and that Paul taught and preached. And listen to what he had just said. If you will, if you need to, go back over them real quickly, but listen to what Paul is just now saying concerning the Messiah. He says, "Now I say, the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be master," or the word here, Lord, "of all. Though he be master of all. But he is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father." Now, what was the old covenant, if you will? What was it? We read it and we studied it in the previous chapter. Wherefore the law, or the covenant, was our what? Schoolmaster. or our tutor or our governor. Anyway, one that was showing us and teaching us concerning the Messiah that was to come. That we needed that Messiah, that we in ourselves are unable to do anything as far as our salvation, but we need the Messiah, Yeshua. And that only He can do this, and only He is what we are to look to. Nothing else, no other acts, no other deeds, no other works, but we are to solely look to Him. And that's what people are so confused about today is because they can't get it in their mind that it ain't nothing they do, but it's everything that He does. And that we don't have to do anything except put our faith in Him and follow His leading of our lives. And they don't seem to understand, people don't seem to understand that in doing so, you manifest Him and His salvation and His works through you. Not nothing I do myself or anything I pretend. It's all in Him. And I will always teach that against anybody else's teaching or any other kind of teaching that we do this or we do that. We put our trust in Him, and He, through our faith in Him, works the work in us, and our lives manifest that work, the works, as James, I think it is, talks about. Show me faith without your works, I'll show you my faith by my works. My life will manifest those works of the Messiah. But is under tutors and governors. I said that one. That's what the law or the New Testament was. I mean, not the New. I'm sorry, the Old Old Covenant. I'll get it right in a minute. The law of the Old Covenant was all about was a tutors and a governors or a schoolmaster to lead us to the Messiah. Even so, we, and I want you to notice, Paul is not just talking to Gentiles here. The church at Galatia was a mixture of Gentile and Jew, just like they are anywhere. And he's including himself along with this assembly there at Galatia. And it says, and so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. And that's exactly, if people would understand, that's exactly what even the Old Covenant was a bondage unto the world, by the world, because it was a natural thing. It was done in a carnal way. It was implemented carnally, and it was administered carnally. And it brought bondage, as we will see here in a little bit. I'm going to try to hurry up. But I wanted to get this first part of this chapter through and get it understood what it's all about. It's not about me, you, or the Old Covenant, or anything concerning that. It's all about the Messiah, because all them was about the Messiah. But when the fullness of time was come, in other words, when it was time for the Messiah to come, when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth His Son, Yeshua, made of a woman and made under the law. He was made under the law, and you've got to understand that yourself. Listen to this next verse. To, and get this word, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. To redeem them that were under the law, that they might become or might receive the adoption of sons. When you look at that, the word redeem there, if you look at the Greek word for it, and that's what I first looked at of the Greek word, and don't ask me to pronounce it, I can give it to you. It's G if you want the dictionary. It's G for Greek 1805, and you can pronounce the name there yourself. But anyway, it's also from two other words, and one of them is just an X, EX. But 1537 and G59. And it is to buy up, that is to ransom, figuratively to rescue from loss, to improve an opportunity, and also the English interpretation, redeem. To purchase that. And I believe the Scriptures teaches us that with His own blood did He purchase us. He bought us by His own blood. And I got to thinking about, of course, I always try to correlate Greek and English. I try to correlate it as well as I can with Hebrew. With the Hebrew, when especially when Yeshua brings a particular word or phrase to me, I try to correlate it not only with the Hebrew or the English interpretation from the Greek, but also from the Hebrew. And looking up the word redeem, and I only took a couple of the translations here of Hebrew for the word redeem. There's about 3 or 4 of them. And yet those that are studying Hebrew, and you think you can take the word redeem out of English and convert that to Hebrew and just go with it, you better look it up, because it can mean the word, the English interpretation of redeemed can mean 2 or 3 or 4 different things concerning Hebrew. And they're not even spelt the same or pronounced the same in Hebrew when they represent different. They're not even spelled. Just as these 2 that I took here, one of them, and I looked it up and tried to correlate, and the best one that I could correlate was with the Hebrew 6299, which is pay dalet hay, or padal, and it is a primitive root to sever, or that is to ransom, generally to release or preserve, deliver, and of course it goes on to redeem or redeemed. But also I looked at the other word here, and it's spelled Gimbal, Olive, Lamed, or Goal, and it's a primitive root word also. Both of these words are primitive root words. In other words, that's where they go back to. And both of these are primitive root words. And this one is to redeem, and this one primarily refers to, this word Gaal primarily refers to, as if you read in the Old Testament or in English, in Hebrew, of Israel, and according to the law, there was a law, in the Old Covenant that dealt with law of kinship. In other words, if I own this piece of property, well, let me give the definition here. It says, according to the Oriental law of kinship, that is to be the next of kin, and as such to be able to buy back a relative's property or marry his widow, and in any wise at all avenger or deliverer to perform the part of the next kinfolks or kinsman, to purchase or ransom or redeem, a redeemer or a revenger. But all of this refers to the kinship. And I've referred to a law within the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, that if, for instance, I own a piece of property and I sold this property to someone out here, if I could not, at any time, I sold it because I needed the money or whatever, but at any time that I was able to buy back that property, I would be able to do so. And if I wasn't able to buy it back, you see, the law was that the next of kin to me. And it would go down, down, down until the actual next of kin. If my brother was my next of kin, well, and he's already passed away, well, then my nephew is my next of kin. Whoever was my next of kin would be able to buy that property back. And that is that's the redeem, the word for redeem, for Gaal. And the word for to be able to ransom or to release or preserve, which closer resembles, or closer, I won't say resembles, but closer correlates with the Greek word that they use, that was translated from, the word padal, pay, dalet, and hay, closerly represents what the Greek word also represented, and that was to be able to release or preserve, or or to sever, to bring back, to deliver, to be redeemed or rescued. This word would more correlate with that one, because of it's not nothing to do, although some people might argue the point of kinship there, but it's not. We wasn't considered kinship. The Gentile was not considered kinship. If I bought property out here from let's say I was a Jew or Israel, and I bought property from an Israeli, well, if at whatever time he wanted or needed to or could, he could buy that property back, or his next of kin could buy it back. But if I go out here and I buy it from a Gentile, tough luck, it's mine. And so they wasn't referred, or wasn't actually included in that kinship relation. So, and you see that all through the Bible. It even gives some examples where some of the people in the scriptures bought land back, And of course, it was a representation or a type and shadow of something else. But that was the law. That was part of the the law under the old covenant, that they was able to do that. But anyway, I wanted to get the understanding of the redeemed. He didn't come so that I could keep the law anymore, but he come to redeem me. Not only to redeem them that were under the law, but to redeem all of whosoever will that would come to him by faith in him. And that's what the scripture are saying, to redeem them that were under the law. Now, if the law was what I needed, and the old covenant was what I needed, and all this new covenant is a renewal of the old covenant, then why did he ever come, and why do I need to be redeemed? Or why does anybody need to be redeemed? It don't make sense. But when you see it the way that Yeshua explains it, and the way he asked Paul to explain it, and the way it really is, it makes all the sense in the world. And to go ahead and go the rest of this, and when we are redeemed, and we understand now that it's not through any works or any law, or any old covenant that he made with the children, but now it's all about this new covenant that he has made with his children, and whosoever will, including the Gentiles, that they would come to him by faith, and not by anything else, by faith. And that is like I said, that's the problem today. People want to reason it out. They want to think about how it's done. They want to see what they ought to do, or think they ought to do, and then they want to act on that instead of just putting their faith in the Messiah and letting him live his life through you, and let that be manifested in your life, that the world would see him in you. Because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son. That Spirit comes into your heart and crying, Abba, Father, which is just an interpretation, Father, Father. Or as my old pastor excuse me, used to say, crying, God is my papa, if you want to read it that way. But it's Father, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant. We're not under the bondage of the old covenant and of the law and of the world, but we are and so therefore we are no more servants, but we are sons, and if we're sons, then an heir of God through, not by, through the Messiah. And he goes on to explain some things here, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time on them, or I'm not going to put a lot of time on them, because I want to get to the further end of this chapter to explain more about what he's doing, what he is saying here. But he's saying it all the way through here, and even from chapter 1, he's saying the same thing all the way through. And now he's referring mostly to the Gentile side of the assembly there. It says, howbeit then when you knew not God, and it did not necessarily mean just the Gentile side, because there's those Jews or Israel that doesn't know God. They claim to be the children of God, but they don't even know God. But howbeit then, when you knew not God, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. In other words, you worshipped idols and so forth. He don't have to name off all the stuff. But now, after that you have known God, or rather, not just that you know God, but rather are known of God. That God knows you. How turn you again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto you desire again to be in bondage? Is that what you want? You want to go back? You want to look at all of that and say, oh, we do all of that again. Do you want to be in bondage? You observe days and months and times and years. You observe these things? Now, a lot of people want to refer to that, and it no doubt does refer to, if you want to look, I think it's in, maybe in Deuteronomy, talking about the Gentiles and how they, observe months and days and years. But I'm going to got news for you. I got a news flash for you if you don't realize it. God's people observed days, months, and years under the old covenant. They did. They observed. Well, that's not what he's talking about. I'll show you it is what he's talking about. I'm afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. I worried about you. All these people are coming in amongst you saying, oh, if you want to be part of the house of Israel, then you got to be circumcised, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to do this other thing, and you got to become this. Yeah, under the old covenant you did have to do these things. But under the new covenant, as he makes so plainly, circumcision don't account to anything. And I'm talking about carnal or fleshly circumcision. It doesn't account to anything. As a matter of fact, he said, I'm afraid of you. If that's what you want to go back to, and if that's where you want to go, I'm afraid of you because I'm afraid I have bestowed upon you. I've given all of this to you and taught all this to you, and labored in this in vain. If that's what you want to do. You want to go back on all of this, that I'm afraid I've labored and bestowed everything in vain. And so I don't have it. He said, brethren, I beseech you, be as I, for I, as ye, you have not injured me. Be as I, for I, as you. You haven't injured me. And that's what I ask of people. Understand what Yeshua is saying. Understand what I'm trying to teach to you. And if you don't understand it, I'm sorry, but you haven't injured me. In other words, it's not going to change my effort to walk into the Messiah. You haven't injured me. You haven't hurt me. But I am beseeching you that you be as I. You know how through infirmity of the flesh, and he goes through this, I preached the gospel unto you at the first, and my temptation, which was in my flesh, you despised not, nor rejected, but received me as an angel of God, as Messiah Yeshua. That's how you received me. Where is then the blessedness you spake of? For I bear you record that if possible, you would have plucked out your own eyes and have given them to me. A lot of people say, well, that Paul's infirmity, and where he teaches that he sought thrice or three times for deliverance from it, but you know, Yeshua finally said, my grace is sufficient to you. A lot of people want to say, well, that ain't what he's talking about. According to this, that's what he was talking about. He always had trouble with his eyes after Yeshua had revealed, made a revelation unto him. He left that infirmity, that little thing in the flesh to remind him that it was God and not him. I am therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth. And a lot of people, I become their enemy because I tell them the truth, but because I tell them it's not nothing to do with what you do or the works that you do, but it's all about him and your faith in him is what it's all about. And because I don't do and I don't agree with the things that they do and proclaim, they don't want to have anything to do with me. And I know that to be true because I know personal ones. Or if I see them, yeah, they got to say how much they love me because that's their proclamation. You know, you're to love everybody, but they won't have anything to do with me. They won't listen to, they won't hear, they won't listen. They ain't got nothing to do. In other words, I'm their enemy, even though they're saying how much they care. Yeah, I love him. Well, if you did. They, now who are they? Who is the they that he's talking about here? They, meaning those that are coming in amongst them, telling them what they need to do, how they need to observe this and how they need to observe that or whatever. They zealously affect you. Not well. They zealously affect you. They come in and they have this warmth of feeling for you. Now, to zealously affect someone, it's to be able to, you can either have a warmth or feeling either for or against whatever they're doing. But evidently they're coming in claiming they have a, you know, warmth of feeling for them, and then trying to come in and change them, you know, affect them. And he gives the reason why. They're not affecting you well. Yea, they would exclude you, that you might affect them. In other words, they would shut you out in order that you might affect them. They can come back and say, they're doing it our way now. But he reminds them, but you know, it good to be zealously affected always in good. And not only when I'm present with you, in other words, when I'm not present with you, it's always to be, you know, to be zealously affected in good things. You know, but you know, and not only when I'm with you, but when I'm not with you, it's always, you know, it's always good to help someone along. And I want you to catch this next verse. He says, my little children of whom I travail in birth again until Messiah be formed in you. In other words, what he's saying is here, my little children, I'm going through the birth pains again. And that evidently means that he's already done it. In other words, he's already preached the gospel to them and taught them how to walk, how to talk, how to live for the Messiah, how to put their faith in the Messiah. But now he's having to come back again and do the same thing again until the Messiah be formed in them, until they finally get it. I desire to be present with you now and to change my voice, for I stand in doubt of you. I would like to come unto you now and see that what I'm thinking and what I'm doubting here is not true. In other words, I want to change my voice. I don't want to be here. And what he's doing here is reprimanding them for allowing things to come in and put doubt in their minds and to start following some of that. He's reprimanding them. He's rebuking them, if you will. Remember, Paul told Timothy to always be ready, to rebuke, and not only just to lift up, but to rebuke. Be ready to stand and rebuke. Why? Because there's always something out there, someone out there who is willing to pervert the gospel of the Messiah. Tell me, now listen to the rest of this very closely. Listen to it very closely. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law. You want to go back to that? And he's evidently, what I said earlier about it being a mixed congregation, Jew and Gentile, or Israel and Gentile, because he's saying here, ye desire to be, tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? And that is to both parties here. Do you desire to be under the law? Do you not hear what the law says? And I've quoted it. I don't know how many times I've said it. I don't know how many times. And the Scripture says it so many times. I don't know how many times. That if that's what you want to be, then you're going to be judged by it. And if you're going to be judged by it, I guarantee you, you're going to be found wanting. You're going to be found in need of something else. And is that what you want? Is that what the people want today? To go back? Everybody's always saying, let's go back. But they don't go back and stop at the apostles and learn what they taught and then follow that. But they want to go all the way back as far as Mount Sinai. And you're making a grave mistake when you do. Tell me that ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons. And I know every one of y'all that at least listening here knows those 2 sons. The one by a bondwoman. What did Sarah tell him? Abraham, I'm too old to have children. Maybe Yahweh meant that you can have a child. I'll send my bondwoman, I'll send my servant into you, and we can have a child that way. And that was the first son. And also the mistake. But anyway, Abraham had 2 sons. The one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman, or Sarah. Hagar, the bondwoman, Sarah, the free woman. But he of the bondwoman was born, what? After the flesh. What did I say? Sarah went to Abraham and said, maybe this is how God intended this to be. I'll send Hagar unto you, and you two can have a son, and, you know, I'll have her have the child upon my lap, and it can become our child. That's how God, Yahweh intends this to do. I'm too old. So that's what happened. But read it, you know what happened there too. The flesh, but he of the free woman by promise. That was the one that Yahweh promised Abraham. Which was the son Isaac by Sarah, and not Ishmael by the bondwoman. But he of the free woman by promise. That's the one Yahweh promised him. Which things are an allegory. Now, what does... Someone tell me what, well, we won't interrupt the message, but what does the word allegory mean? According to the interpretation and the Greek dictionaries, G238, and it's from 242, which is to be different. Did you catch that? Which things, what this bondwoman and this flesh, are different. For these are the two covenants. You know, and Pat was reading this evidently this morning, and she turned around to me and she said, exactly how did you say that? How can you say one when the Word of God says two?
Two covenants.
Two covenants. Not one, and not a renewing of the one, but two covenants. Even the Old Testament verifies that. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, not like the one I made with their fathers, which they break. I'll make a new one with them. And he goes on and explains here. For these are the two covenants, the one from the Mount Sinai. What does that tell you? What covenant come from Mount Sinai? What was there? Which gendereth, or if you want to look that word up, it means to give birth, if you will, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar, which is the bondwoman. I'm not saying this. The Word is saying this. Paul, one of Yeshua's chosen prophets or apostles, is writing this. Not George, but George is interpreting it according to the Spirit of the Messiah, which is in him, which is enlightening him, is saying the same thing that Paul is saying. That covenant gendered or gave birth to bondage. Why? Because it was an earthly covenant or a fleshly covenant made with man, administered by man. And it was bondage. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. Do you hear what he's saying? This Hagar, this covenant, this one covenant is Hagar, and Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and that Mount Sinai, that one answereth to Jerusalem, And he's talking about the earthly Jerusalem, the one that's over there today, that people are putting so much stock in. But he said here, even here now, which now is, talking about the city, the town, the mount that it's set on, Jerusalem, now, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. Even Jerusalem over there is in bondage with her children. And ladies and gentlemen, that Jerusalem is still, to this day, in bondage with her children. Why? Because they do not recognize the Messiah as their Messiah. They're still leading to Mount Sinai, which in fact answers to them. In other words, if you understand what he's saying there is that you could only sacrifice or worship in the place that Yahweh put his name. And Jerusalem was that place on earth. And so everything, even from Mount Sinai, answered to where Yahweh put his name. There. And it was still, and it was then, and is still in bondage with its children, because they do not and will not accept the Messiah. Of course, we know that's still part of the plan of Yeshua and Yahweh, and when the fullness of time has come for this new, which he's talking about here. But Jerusalem, which is above, that place that Yeshua promised us, that covenant that he's made with you and I today, that through faith in him, that he's gone away to prepare a place that where he is, we can be also. And I got news for you. That place right now and everything that we do now is a spiritual walk, which a lot of people want to say, no, it's not a spiritual walk. It is a spiritual walk, because that Jerusalem right now is spiritual Jerusalem in yours and my heart. We are the children of that Jerusalem. If you are, in fact, a child of the Messiah. You are the children of that Jerusalem, not the one over there in Israel right now. You're the children of that Jerusalem, which is the mother, as this scripture says, the mother of us all. That's the one. Not Mount Sinai, nor the natural earthly Jerusalem that's over right now. That land is not the land that Yeshua has promised you and I. He's promised us a new heaven and a new earth. And that's what my journey is all about, is to get to that earth, new heaven, that new earth, when he brings it down, to be a citizen of that one. Not of that one over now, the one that he's coming with. That's mine. And that's the one that all the apostles, even the prophets, spoke of. And all the apostles spoke of. Not just Paul. All the apostles spoke of. For it is written, well, let me read the 26th verse. I paraphrased it there, but let me read it. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free. That's the free one. Which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice thou barren that bearest not, break forth and cry thou that travailest not, for the desolate hath many more children than she which hath a husband. The bondwoman did not have the husband. The free woman is the one that has the husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, not Ishmael, which was Mount Sinai, Hagar. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. I'm the children of the promise that he made to Abraham. And Abraham believed him, and it was counted unto him, his faith was counted unto him for his righteousness. Not the fact that he went out and done what God said, but the fact that he believed God in the first place, and then went out and acted on that. Which now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuteth him after the Spirit. Even so it is now. And that's still true. It's still true. We don't realize the persecution so much because laws today prevents persecution the way they were persecuted. But we are still persecuted, and if they could, not only that, but they would still be doing what Paul started out doing. They would still be, if they could, imprisoning people that teach in this name, that teach the Messiah. They would still be imprisoning and putting to death or whatever they could do to you for doing that, if it were lawful in the world for them to do it now. They would still be doing it because they don't believe in this Messiah, and they would love to stamp it out. But Satan also has his angels of darkness, or wolves in sheep's clothing, that come in among the children and try to divert or pervert this gospel, saying you need to do this and you need to do that, and even some of them even still confesses you need to be circumcised in the flesh. And a lot of people hold those that proclaim that in high esteem. They want them to come and teach at their assemblies. They hold them in high esteem that teach the ways of the Jews, if you will. Nevertheless, what saith the Scripture? And you can like this, or y'all can lump it, I guess the old saying now is. But the Scripture says you cast out the bondwoman. And that's exactly what Sarah done. But she said, cast out the bondwoman and her son. For the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free, we are the children of the promise that Yahweh made to Abraham, and that Yeshua, if there's any renewing, that would be what Yeshua done, was renewed that promise that Yahweh made to Abraham. And in that promise he said, I'm going away to prepare your place, that where I am, there you may be also. And if I go away, I'll come again to receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. We're not there now. Just because we are the children of the Messiah, we're not there yet. We haven't received that promise yet. We only have the Spirit that He promised that would lead us and guide us to that place. He promised us that Spirit, and He has delivered that. He's fulfilled that in that we are filled, those that are His are filled with His Spirit, and that Spirit leads us and guides us and teaches us all things. And it will guide us all the way to the promised land that He's promised us. You and I, just as the children of Israel, as that was a type and shadow of the deliverance from Egypt to the promised land, the wilderness walk that they did there, you and I are right now from the promise that Yahweh made, or Yeshua made when He was here on the earth. Yahweh made to Abraham first, and to Yeshua made to those when He was here. We're on that journey now to that promised land. And there's there's one thing, or two things if you will, that's yet to be fulfilled, and that is our eternal rest, which we observe today, and on all Sabbaths we remember that rest that one day we're going to receive, and also the deliverance of that promised land that He promises us. Those things have yet to be fulfilled. But all other things Yeshua fulfilled in Himself, that He might be able, that He could redeem us from the law. He fulfilled all of it, that He could redeem us from it. So I know that's contrary to a lot of teachings, especially Christianity. It's completely contrary to that. But it's contrary to a lot of the teachings that's going on today in Hebrew roots, Messianic, whatever you want to call it. I don't call myself either one. I call myself a follower of the Messiah, or a follower or disciple of Yeshua, not of what man is making out to be followers. But anyway, I hope that through this lesson, not just today, but the ones that we have brought forth and the ones that we will bring on next week or so, whatever Yeshua leads us in. But I'd like to make one thing here about, of course, in the next chapter, where Paul really expresses, the living by faith and by walking in the Spirit, not in things that man says we need to do, but walking in the Spirit and living by that faith that we claim to have in the Messiah. As he goes ahead and if you want, well, you go ahead and read it and study it for yourself and get what you get out of it, and then next week see if you get what He has me to bring you. That way we're that much together, that we're that much ahead of it. Okay, but in the meantime, hey, peace be unto you. Have a good day.